What's up, everybody? Welcome to another installment of That Science and Nature Show. I'm your host, Jeremy Howard, and joining me for this episode, we have Becky O'Neill.
How's it going?
Webster Heffern.
Hi, everyone.
And technical guru, Ray Cannonberg.
Hi, everybody.
So, it's winter break now at UMSL, and we will be back in the studio doing regular weekly episodes in a few weeks. But for winter break, we want to do just sort of a fun little episode that's kind of special, not really related to news or anything. And originally, I had this idea last July that we would all go... I guess at the time, me, you, and Sebastian would go watch Oppenheimer and then do an episode about that. But y'all had your big field course in Costa Rica, which is fantastic, and it didn't work out. So now I was like, why don't we just do it now, like 6 months later, way later than the movie came out.
It's fair enough.
So despite that, the movie being like 6 months old, the movie is the themes and things presented in the movie are still just as timely, and there's still just as many interesting, intricate conversations we can have about that. It is rife with things to talk about. So I think even if we did this like a year later, it would still be a really good podcast episode.
Well, it's poignant. Didn't it just win some things at the
It
Golden
did also
Globes?
just win a bunch of things at the Golden Globes, yes. Many of the actors won. Cillian Murphy won. I don't remember who else won. I think Robert Downey Jr. also won. But yeah, so... Oppenheimer came out July 21st, 2023 to really massive critical and financial success. It was directed by Christopher Nolan, who's famous for movies like Inception, Tenet, the Batman trilogy with Heath Ledger, and who played Batman in that movie?
Christian Bale.
Christian Bale, thank you. It's like, got to go through a couple iterations of Batman. But yeah, really critically and financially successful movie, and lots of things that the movie covers. Basically, the movie covers the story of Robert J. Oppenheimer and kind of his rise to fame and how he is the father of the atomic bomb and basically, in the end, sort of his political downfall. I should mention, if you're listening to this, we're going to go full spoilers, so if you haven't seen the movie for any reason, definitely go watch it. I would highly recommend it, and then come back and listen. But yeah, it covers the rise and fall of Oppenheimer. It doesn't cover as much. I thought the movie was going to be a lot more about the bomb than original, like from the promos and stuff. I thought it would just be entirely about the bomb, but there's actually a lot more layered in that. The bomb is kind of the centerpiece, but there's a lot more going on.
Well, can we talk about how they framed the whole movie, though?
Yeah, go for it.
They frame the whole movie from the standpoint of he insists it's not a trial, but where this hearing where he's getting his security clearance taken away, and they frame the entire movie of he's getting his life dissected in this hearing, and then they're going back and they're showing his life while this is happening.
Yeah, they do the kind of interesting juxtaposition thing where usually in like movies and film and stuff, they put flashback sequences in black and white to be like, this is the old stuff in the past and color in the present. They actually flip-flop it where the more present modern day stuff is in black and white and the flashbacks are in color. So you're kind of like working up to the present, so to speak, even though the present is like in the 1950s, I think, at that point.
Yeah, early 50s, late 40s, maybe 49.
Yeah. But yeah, so interesting kind of artistic choice there. But I want to just start out asking the panel, what did we think of the movie overall? We'll go a lot into specifics in terms of themes and plot points and all that, but what do we think about it just generally?
I thought it was good. It's kind of uniquely from, I don't know, like if you're not from the United States and you're not familiar with weird Senate hearings and McCarthyism, and it might feel like it's out of context, but I thought from my personal point of view, I enjoyed it. It was a good film.
Yeah, I would agree. I think I really enjoyed the film. Maybe even as good as Godzilla. But I was not expecting to enjoy it as much as I was. I was like, oh man, I'm going to have to sit down and throw 3 hours of my life away watching a movie. Because I don't watch a lot of movies. But it was entertaining, I think, really think from start to finish. I didn't enjoy the black and white sequences as much, but those were the darker sequences of the movie. It was the takedown of this man who had done wonderful work for his country, whether he totally agreed with it all the time or not, who was not afraid to express his opinion, and those black and white sequences for that reason were hard to watch. It was like, this is a political takedown of a really responsible scientist.
Yeah, the movie being framed around the trial more so than the bomb surprised me because, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, I thought it was going to be more just like, we're going to start, someone's going to come to his office and be like, we need you to build the bomb. And the movie's going to be about them building the bomb. And then the movie's going to end when they drop the bomb. But that's not how it's framed. It's framed as that this man is in some legal trouble, or at least it looks like some legal trouble. And then you find out sort of, how did we get to this point? And then that includes all the stuff about the atomic bomb.
Right. I'm definitely biologist, not historian. But when those hearings were going on, and I think both of you saw the movie a little more recently than me, what was the point of that? Just Robert Downey Jr.'s character trying to get rid of communists? What was
So-
the...
No, he was trying to promote himself. Was part of it. He had been insulted by Oppenheimer in an earlier.
Oh, that's right.
In an earlier
Yes.
hearing, and he wanted to get back at this guy, and also he was insulted by Oppenheimer when Oppenheimer turned down the job at Princeton. He thought maybe Oppenheimer had undermined him to Einstein. Turned out Oppenheimer hadn't in the context of the movie, but
Yes, it's flooding back now.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
he used the...
he was vengeful, and he wanted Oppenheimer also out of the political scope because there were different opinions going on. He was the defense secretary. He had this opinion that he wanted to promote the H-bomb. This was his big thing, and Oppenheimer was very much not in support of the H-bomb at that point.
Right.
Perfect. That was the reminder I needed.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is all back in context now.
Okay.
Yeah, Robert Downey Jr. played General Strauss, I believe is the name of the character, who basically was going up for this big cabinet position, right?
He
Webster?
was defense secretary.
Defense secretary, yeah. But like, I was kind of surprised, like, oh, that's like what the movie's about. The movie's about like getting revenge in a way and like trying to take somebody down for like basically like your reputation being like, you know, ridiculed and insulted. Like it's kind of like a revenge story in some ways if you view it from that lens.
They contextualized it that way, but I love the way that it ended, and I know we don't have to go into this yet, but I think the way it ended almost recontextualized the whole thing.
Yeah.
So we can
Yeah,
go into
it
that.
definitely brought it back to some other themes. So this movie has a lot going on. I was taking notes, well, not during, but feverishly after the credits rolled, I was taking many, many notes about just themes and things to talk about. I guess we'll just kind of start bullet by bullet. So towards the beginning of the movie, when we're kind of figuring out, or as the audience we're figuring out Oppenheimer's kind of background, how he's going through like school and kind of being trained as a scientist and all that, we find out he's Jewish. So during the 1930s and 1940s, anti-Semitism is on the rise from Nazi Germany and also just kind of other parts of the world. And one of the things that the movie kind of touches on more towards the beginning and less so later on is just kind of the persecution of scientists based on their ethnicity and religious background. So what do we think about how the movie tackled that?
I don't think it delved terribly much into it. I guess I was reminded that he was a Jew at that point, and then I feel like it never really revisited that topic. It was brought up, and it was first introduced as a topic from the trial, and then they do the flashback, and they show Oppenheimer hanging out with this other scientist who's also a Jew. They're both Jews from New York. They meet.
Yeah, who was that? I thought that was like the heavier set man. I thought that was his
Yeah.
brother, but that was not
No,
his brother.
that was not
his
his
brother was a
brother.
different
His
character.
brother's a different
Who was
character.
that man?
I don't remember all the names of all the scientists,
Okay.
unfortunately. Do you remember, Becky?
I don't remember his name, but I know it was when Oppenheimer was in Germany, and I couldn't tell if he was like postdocing or doing his PhD or whatever, but they met at a talk from some other famous physicist, and then this Jewish fellow on the train was like, "You gotta go meet Heisenberg." So I remember all of that. And I think, didn't Heisenberg come to the United States?
No, Heisenberg was the one who didn't. Heisenberg the
He
entire time
didn't.
was working for Germany.
Yeah.
Okay.
I did not know that until I saw this movie.
Wow.
Yeah. Later in the movie, they're able to get Niels Bohr to come over from, I
Okay,
think it's
that was
it.
Denmark or
Denmark, yeah.
Denmark, and like kind of smuggle him to the United States, which he doesn't actually ultimately end up working with them. But yeah, it was getting him to come over, like kind of sneaking him out of Europe was a big sort of geopolitical gymnastic thing they had to do.
Could
during
be its
that
own
time.
movie.
Yeah, that actually would probably make a pretty good story.
I'm glad that they touched on it, because it seems in World War II to not find a way to touch on it would have not been prescient for the movie. So
Yeah, actually, they did mention it once or twice more when he was like, "My people are getting persecuted and put into camps." He had a very personal. The movie presented it as though he had a very personal feeling about what was happening in Germany. So
Yeah. I know also, I don't remember at which point, they find out from somebody, I think it might have been when Niels Bohr, they get him over, and they kind of find out that the Germans took like a wrong turn at some point.
Oh yeah, that was
Yeah.
great because they started going down too much the H-bomb direction. I think was
Yeah.
what it was,
And
and
it
they
seemed-
weren't ready for that.
And then, I don't remember if this is earlier, like in the middle of the movie, but Oppenheimer basically mentions that like the Jewish scientists are not being taken seriously in Germany because they viewed quantum mechanics as Jewish science. Quote
Oh yeah,
unquote.
and
So,
Hitler
like,
was
that was kind of
rejecting it.
Yeah, that was kind of the right way to go to get towards the bomb.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and I think they pointed out that because Hitler was rejecting the Jewish science, he was never going to get to the bomb as fast as they would.
Right. Yeah, because he mentions that like his own disdain for them is actually what's like preventing their progress and blinding him from getting to where they want to.
Yeah, I kind of like that in a way, because in reality, there's no such thing as Jewish science.
Right.
Or any other kind of science.
It is a slur term that he's using.
So I appreciate the point in the movie being made. Like, you can't just... Science is a process. It doesn't belong to any religion or ethnicity or...
Who knows? Maybe maybe those of us with Jewish blood are more quantum mechanical than the rest of you.
Yeah. Another theme that is brought up in the movie a lot, you see pretty much towards the middle of the movie when they're actually making the bomb, is science and the military and how they kind of have to work together or not work together in some cases and are kind of at each other's throats in some ways. So what were our thoughts about how that was sort of played out, both in the historical context of like, you know, the era of like McCarthyism, like Becky mentioned, and communism being around, and then military secrecy, but also having to kind of give information and kind of work together, but also be very secret about it, all of that.
I liked Matt Damon's character a lot.
I did too.
I loved his character. I was going to mention that.
Yes.
Yes, he was one of my
Matt
two
Damon
favorite
played,
characters in the movie, the other being Oppenheimer.
Yeah, Matt Damon played Admiral. I think he was an admiral, but
Was
he was
it
basically
Admiral. I thought it was General.
It was general. Yeah, thank you. He basically plays this general, sort of overseeing the project for the atomic bomb. And so Oppenheimer and him are talking a lot about how things are going. When Oppenheimer needs something, he kind of has to go to Damon, particularly for security clearance, which is a big thing that he can't seem to get during this movie. As well as, you know, when problems come up and government spending and all that stuff.
Yeah, but they definitely presented the general as one of those few characters who was always on Oppenheimer's side. He'd be willing to express some contention with what was happening at certain points, but he was always, at the end of the day, Oppenheimer's friend. And that was really neat, that there was that one person, I guess in addition to Oppenheimer's wife, who you could really count on during the movie.
Which one? Which one? Which wife?
The
real wife, the one he actually married.
Okay.
It was Emily Blunt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, he did technically have multiple love interests over the course of the movie. Because Gene Tatlock was his first like love interest, but it was unclear if they actually got married or not. Or like
that was kind of, I was amazed at how scandalous that was, that Oppenheimer's brother's, I guess she was fiancé at one point.
I think so, yeah.
Would be sleeping with Oppenheimer. Is that a true story? Do we know? Or?
I did look a little bit of it up. It does seem like, at least from just Google searches, he did have relations with all those women. So.
Wow.
It was a wild time. Einstein has a pretty interesting history with all of that as well.
Does he?
Yeah,
I have not heard this.
Yeah, Einstein's history with women and his relationships is very very nuanced. So yeah, I think.
Okay.
With not to say that it's the whole, you know, that whole section of people, but it was definitely pretty interesting.
Yeah, the movie definitely paints Oppenheimer, I think, a little more sympathetic, even though he's kind of sleazy and sleeping around and like, you know, breaking relationships. Because he sleeps with Gene Tatlock and then kind of like, will they, won't they? He's like, no, actually I'm not. But then he kind of comes back for her and then he leaves her again. And then, he kind of tells his wife, Emily Blunt's character, like about this, and like, she's like not having it.
Like, I'm not gonna feel sorry for you right now.
Yeah, and then also you find out towards the end of the movie when he's at like some future gala thing. I don't remember what it was, but he basically tells someone else about it. Oh, like so and so, that's so and so's wife, and someone's like, oh, have you like had relations with her? And then the husband found out. And he's like, oh no, that didn't happen. The husband never found out. Like it was like a third woman. Like I don't remember what her name was, but there were like multiple women that Oppenheimer was going around to. And I was like, man, Oppenheimer's.
No, I thought that when he talked about the husband never finding out, I thought he was talking about his brother never finding out about. Maybe I'm.
In my mind, there's at least 3 women, and he was not faithful to any of them.
Okay.
It seems like. So, but like the movie kind of makes him a little more sympathetic when it's like, he's actually kind of not super great of a person right now.
Oh, I didn't feel like they made it sympathetic.
I kind of thought they did. Like in terms of all of his turmoil, because we're getting way off the military thing, but it's fine. We'll cycle back. Because they do a lot of like he's having a lot of like mental issues and dissociating a lot. So I felt like the movie was trying to do that more to be like he's a troubled man. Like don't feel bad that he's doing this.
Oh,
that was my take.
My take was that sure, this fellow is struggling with this great moral weight and he can't eat, and Cillian Murphy is starving himself, so he looks like Oppenheimer. But I didn't feel like that was an excuse for any of his dalliances, especially when it's not like he was talking to his partners and getting consent. Like,
Right.
all right, wife, I'm going to have some extramarital affairs. Are you cool with that? So I didn't think it presented him as like a sympathetic character in that way. I thought it was more like, here is a potential flaw. He was not open with his partners about his behavior.
Okay.
But I don't know. What do you think?
Oh, I mean, I could sympathize with him, but I'm not always the best person in the world myself. I think I really liked that moment when he was depressed and frustrated in the forest. His other lover had just
Committed
offed
suicide.
herself.
Ooh, wow.
And Emily Blunt's character, he was honest with her about it, and she was like, "Get yourself together. I'm not here to feel sorry for you."
Yeah,
right now."
that was such a good moment.
Yeah.
I was like, you tell him Emily Blunt's character. She's like, I do not have time for this. We have a
Yeah.
child already. Like, we got other stuff to do.
But she stayed loyal to him though.
Yeah.
And the way they presented her character at the end was really wonderful. She was pissed at that other scientist who had betrayed him.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
She was an alcoholic, yes?
Yes,
Okay, I
very
was just like,
much so.
because I was just like, I feel like she's drinking a lot in these scenes. I don't actually know if she is or not.
I
or
love
was.
that when they first introduce her, one of the first things she does is she pulls the flask out of her pocket.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
Yeah,
Foreshadowing.
Yes.
very much so.
I mean, I remember from it in pretty much every scene, like when Oppenheimer comes back when they first have their kid and the baby's crying and she's like in the kitchen drinking, and then like every other scene she has
That
like, a
was-
cocktail in her hand.
That
I'm
was
like, okay, I'm pretty sure she's an
distressing.
alcoholic.
Watching her, yeah.
Well, and who did they send the baby with temporarily?
Oh,
they?
that was oh my goodness. They had the something incident. It was like Chevalier.
Yeah, Chevalier. Was he the one who took care of the kid for a little
Yeah,
while?
for a little while.
Yeah.
Oh, but then he ended up being like,
Potentially a communist.
yeah, potentially associated with the Soviets by the end, and
Oh, yeah.
Oppenheimer was not sure whether to betray him.
Yeah.
And I guess there was also that earlier moment when Oppenheimer was talking with Matt Damon's character, and he like kind of fudged around the story, or what was.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he wouldn't give the name of the contact. Was like one thing they're trying to probe him on.
Well, and was Emily Blunt was also a scientist, right?
She was a biologist, I believe.
Yeah.
Like she had. So I kind of appreciated that. Whether how much of it's true, who knows? Because those are very intimate things that they were showing, and I haven't read biographies or history books about it. But I appreciated them showing her being so complicated, like being a scientist who's overshadowed by your spouse, struggling with alcoholism and feeling useful, having kids and likely postpartum depression on top of that, and just showing, just the complexity of that.
You know, I didn't think about that. The postpartum depression. I bet she would. That was exactly what was happening when she was drunk there in the kitchen, and he comes in, and they decide to have the other couple foster the kid for a little while. She was probably right in the middle of postpartum depression when that all started. I didn't process that.
And she was probably struggling even before then, like, because I see in these movies a lot where the wives of the scientists are pushed aside a little bit, but they really portrayed her experience as really complicated and nuanced as a scientist in her own right. So I appreciated that.
Yeah. I did find it funny. I think I literally laughed out loud during the movie when they just brought the baby over, and like they didn't talk about this with the other couple at all. They're like, "Can you just take care of this baby for a while?" And I'm like, "Could you imagine just doing this in this day and age?" Like,
Yeah, different time.
I just like we
Yeah,
can't
no,
do this
they'll
right
call
now. Can you
social
just take the
services on
baby?
you in today's day and age. Yeah,
And they're
you
like,
don't get
"Sure." It's like, okay.
You could use a baby.
What's one more?
Yeah.
Well, they weren't yet at Los Alamos at that point, right? That was they were
that was
still at
slightly
Berkeley.
before,
They were
yeah.
still at Berkeley.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think when they got to Los Alamos, there was kid number 2. And I remember they didn't cover the transition super well. I get it, already a long movie, but I'm like, okay, they just picked up the kids. Now they're going to Los Alamos, and they're like, this will be fine.
Oh, I thought they did the transition when they started showing all the women having all those babies at Los Alamos.
Yeah, there's a scene in the middle
Yeah.
where
Oh, yeah.
Matt Damon and Oppenheimer are walking around, and Matt Damon's character is complaining about the number of pregnancies they have to deal with because it's more mouths to feed, more government funding that has to be spent for the project in terms of like maintaining all the like health and wealth of the families. And he's like, Oppenheimer's like, well, you know, birth control is not one of my fortes. And as he says that, his like now pregnant wife with their second child that walks by with their firstborn, and like
Yeah.
that was such a good joke.
Zing.
So yeah, there was definitely a lot of pregnancy happening during that time.
I should have given it a rewatch. I can see I'm getting things out of order in the
Yeah.
movie. I'm sorry.
But back to the science and the military thing, because we got off track of. Are there any other points we wanted to make about that in terms of how that was portrayed? Besides Matt Damon's character, because he was the sort of frontward-facing official from the military, but in terms of other military officials, like getting security clearance, Matt Damon's character had that like secondary guy with the glasses. I don't remember his name, but he was the guy that wouldn't give him
being a bad guy. Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't give him security
he's
clearance.
sneaky. I liked that they portrayed Oppenheimer as naive. Like, surely we'll be done. The government won't make any more bombs. They're not going to move on to the hydrogen bomb. And I think even Matt Damon was like, So, yeah, like if you make something like that and you expect it won't be politicized or other people aren't going to take that product and run with it, that is totally naive.
Yeah, the government is very notorious throughout history about doing horrible things. And people are like, the government wouldn't do that, and the government does something horrible. And they're like, oh, didn't see that coming. Yeah.
They wouldn't do it right now.
They wouldn't do it right now, but like maybe later. Okay, and then the last sort of theme I took down was just sort of scientists and their politics and political leanings and how that kind of influences things. So do we have any thoughts on that? Because Oppenheimer, at least the way the movie portrays it, is interested in communism from an intellectual standpoint, but he himself does not really claim himself a communist. And there's this distinction between...
I liked that. They were very clear about that he was curious about the views. He was supportive of the people on campus who were interested in unionizing different factions of the campus. Like they wanted to unionize the professors, he wanted to unionize this. The other professor was very much warning Oppenheimer, don't get so involved with this. You're getting yourself into trouble right now. But Oppenheimer was like, no, I'm curious. There's the naivete coming out a little bit. And they kept that with his character throughout the whole movie. I think that was very much one of the lines through his character was he was never afraid to speak his mind, never afraid to be intellectually curious about something without being fully invested in it, especially with his politics.
Yeah, the interesting distinction that they made kind of in the middle of the movie is that there is like Russia communism and there is like American United States communism. We're kind of seeing that divide like pre-Cold War, and that like communism can kind of have different flavors, so to speak, but during like the Red Scare era, well, or even before it, it's kind of more the fear of communism, like the propaganda people are feeding into that, like, oh, communism, that's a bad thing, like that means you're a Russian, like you're against the United States, like we have to investigate you. And like Oppenheimer throughout the movie is constantly being like watched and examined, like every minutia. I think in the middle of the movie, I don't remember if it's Matt Damon's character or someone else is like telling him like people are going through your trash, looking through your stuff, like people are listening to your phone lines, like get a clue. Because he has no idea what's going on.
I don't think it was Matt Damon's character, but I do remember that moment when somebody, I think it was one of the other scientists was warning him, like, get a clue, like, this is all happening to you right now. And his wife was upset.
Yeah, it's a shame because it's one of those things that it shouldn't have happened. This is supposed to be the land of free thinking and free speech, and it clearly wasn't at the time.
I'd argue in this day and age, even communism, like we still have leftover sentiments from the Cold War.
Yeah.
Like I feel
fair.
like if you were to openly say I'm a communist, people would associate you with Russia or like anti-US.
I don't know. I guess it depends where you live.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not saying like everybody, but I'm saying in certain parts of the United States, I can see that sentiment still being there.
That's true. Yeah, you don't want to walk through rural Missouri and say like I am a socialist. But if you like, I know I have a friend who is a member of the Socialist Party in Washington State, and that's totally cool there. So it really depends where you are nowadays.
Probably depends on where you are in Washington State too, honestly.
Yeah, I mean he's in Seattle, so
Yeah, that makes sense.
I just wish we had more. I don't know, because if I sat down with someone who is 100% communist, I'd be like, I don't think these ideas work, and it seems like they've trended towards totalitarianism in the end, but you can exist, and I don't think you're some anti-American because you have those views. It's like,
and usually people don't intend to be anti-American with those views. They
Indeed.
intend the best. They don't realize that it trends towards totalitarianism.
yeah, it's usually folks that want equity in income, and I think people of all political stripes can see inequity, like, or at least I hope they can.
And can desire for more equity.
Yeah.
Acknowledging it, I guess, is a different thing. But yeah.
I realized that I skipped a bullet point. So one other theme
All
before scientists and political leanings that I jumped over was the scientists as a community overall.
Oh, I was going to mention that. Can we
talk?
talk about the politics of science?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Go for it. What you wanna make?
Well, I mean, there was the great line with Einstein at the end. I don't know if we want to discuss that yet.
Up to you.
But, well, okay. I guess now is an okay time to bring it up. Oppenheimer was very clear during the movie how he felt about Einstein, how he felt like Einstein was the past and he was the present. And sure, Einstein was the big guy of his day, but today we have these other people. And very shortly after that, it turns out Einstein commented to him, well, I was aware when you guys had this celebration for me at Berkeley celebrating my life's work that I was no longer considered to be in the know, that I was considered, that the science was considered to have moved past me, and you guys were just doing that almost as a pat on the back. And one day this is going to happen to you, Oppenheimer. And sure enough, in the days later of the development of the hydrogen bomb, and Oppenheimer's getting this award, and he very much does go through that himself. But I think that's the politics of science, I think that comes up in every scientist's life. Like I saw watching that, it's like, oh my God, that's exactly what I always fear is going to happen to me someday. I'm going to have some wonderful breakthrough at some point in my career, and later people are going to be patting me on my back like, oh yeah, you helped us a long time ago, but now we've moved on to this stuff. Thanks so much for your hard work.
When I saw that, I know the movie was trying to be very profound, but it didn't strike me as anything revelatory because that's kind of how everything works. Just like I think about like actors and like musicians and stuff. Like there's really popular ones right now, and they will age and die. And we'll talk about, oh, so and so died. I remember that song or that movie they're in, and we really enjoyed that. But like their time has kind of come and gone.
That's
and
a good point. It does happen in every facet of society. But I guess in the movie it was profound to me because I don't know if people always realize that it happens to scientists too. It's not just happening to musicians. It's not just happening to artists. It's not just happening to well-celebrated public figures. It's happening behind the scenes as well.
It's bittersweet, but I kind of look forward. I hope I make it to getting old enough that I'm going, what are those darn kids talking about now? Because it's like a blind spot, right? I don't realize how society is going to evolve. And I'm talking about the good ways. Yeah. Hopefully not bad ways, or science for that matter. So I'm kind of excited, and I hope I live long enough to see what comes next. But it's definitely really bittersweet to think about.
I think the first time I ever even started to feel that way, and I know I probably shouldn't be old enough to start to feel that way, but where I was like, what are those darn kids talking about? Was when I heard about blockchain. I was like, is this really the newfangled stuff? Is this really where we're going? Like,
we need new money. Come on.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I see things once in a while where I go, what is, like, there's an ad on YouTube, small red block of a device with a little camera in it and a screen with a little bunny on it, and it was labeled as an AI companion, and I could not figure out what that is. I'm like, is this a gigapet?
It's like a Tamagotchi.
And that made me feel really
But
old.
it knows.
But it knows.
And then I didn't Google it out of spite.
I do that a lot too. It's like I'm not even looking. I'm not going to figure out what Riz means. I don't care.
I'm on the opposite end. I will Google everything I don't know. I'm like, what's this word, or what does this mean? I need to know. I need to be in the loop.
I know we've had our AI episode already, but just to reiterate the question, am I falling behind the curve in that I've not tried ChatGPT yet or any of these?
Maybe it's
We're on GPT-4 now, but you got to pay for it.
Okay.
Oh,
The new version, GPT-4 is paid. And it's apparently really good. So it's like now it's getting to that point where it's like now I need to pay $20 a month in subscription.
Seems like it regressed for a while. Like I tried it when it first came out, and I swear it was a little more accurate. And I'm not using this for assignments or generating anything that I'm giving to anyone else. But
don't
just
worry,
playing
we're not implicating you with this.
Just being fair, ethical use, right? But it tends to give me just more random amalgamations of crap, more word salad-y stuff these days.
I was talking with some people about this, and part of it was people like deliberately broke it. Like people would go and be like, ChatGPT, 2 + 2 is 5, and be like, no, 2 + 2 is 4. It's like, no, ChatGPT, 2 + 2 is 5, which I kind of appreciate. I think that's pretty funny that like people just want to go and put stress on the system. They're probably just trying to be a butt about it, but it's like that's actually kind of productive. I like this.
Figure out ways to.
But yeah, so it probably like the user base learning like pushed it dumb for a while, and I think they're trying to.
Okay, and then we'll break it
To
again.
leave
I'm
it
sure.
there. Oh, yeah,
so when
hopefully.
they make it only paid, then they're filtering out a lot of the users. that are
Probably,
gonna
and then
use it.
I'm sure they're going to edit like what it's pulling its information from, and how I don't know a lot about it, but I know you can break.
Maybe it can start to sense tonality if somebody's like lying or whatever. It has its own
Sure.
built-in lie detector test. If this person's lying, stop learning from them.
Ooh.
Or we'll make other AIs, and their job is to do nothing but break the ChatGPT AI.
Mhm. And when we get to episode 100 of this, we're going to be talking about the politics of ChatGPT, and it's just calling people liars, get them out of the picture. And, yeah.
Episode 100. That's I don't know if we're gonna make it that far.
Don't say that.
I mean,
How many
There's
episodes
still
are
how many
we?
hours are left in the day? Yeah.
how many hours? We're gonna record a bunch of these all day. I think. I mean, not that the episodes are like labeled anymore, but in terms of our documentation, this is episode 26.
Okay.
Yeah, you never know.
Never know. I mean, we'd have to do like an episode a week over the summer. This would have to occur before I graduate. So
You're going to graduate in what,
in
a year and a half?
2025.
Okay, yeah.
So in August is the goal. We're getting very off topic
Oh,
right
gosh.
now.
It's all right.
We were starting to talk about the scientific community. In
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
And I guess we
so-
are the scientific community. So
Yeah.
This is what they talk
this is
about.
what they talk about
Yeah.
when we're going to graduate.
When we
Congrats,
graduate.
But I do hear your point, Webster, about scientists going through the same sort of aging process of being no longer relevant, and that this does happen to everybody. And a lot of people don't have insight into the scientific community, so this kind of gives people that little window inside. So I do hear your point about that, even though I didn't think the ending was like amazing revelatory. But something else the movie tackles as well is this big idea of guilt and feeling guilty with scientists and their creations. So, of course, Robert J. Oppenheimer built the atomic bomb. We know from history that the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki to get the Japanese to surrender. The movie talks about this a lot, or shows this a lot, with conversations between people on the project for the atomic bomb, as well as political officials and senators and stuff. There's the whole scene where the senator is sitting there, like, I have to go to President Truman and be like, what are we going to tell him about this weapon we allegedly have that we're going to tell Germany and Japan and all that we're going to use? They're kind of picking out targets and stuff and figuring out, like, what are we going to do with this weapon? And Oppenheimer is slowly starting to realize, like, oh no, like, this is
real.
actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's tough. Like, and I mean, obviously he's not the only person that has experienced things to that end, but it's like he's trying to do a career and he's trying to explore things and things like that. And ideally their intentions aren't to blow up cities and things like that. But
Well, and
once
they. Oh, go ahead.
well, I mean,
finish.
once the military being the outside party gets a hold, is it really on them that it gets like exacerbated or whatever the term you want to use is?
I was kind of amazed. So I looked up the time cover that he was on once they showed the time cover in the movie. They did a pretty accurate job of getting him to look the same way. But it was on Instagram. They showed the two side by side. And they showed somebody commenting on Instagram. Even today, somebody's commenting mass murderer about Oppenheimer. I was like, whoa, this is actually how people still feel? Like the whole part of the point of the movie was he was a civil servant, and he himself was not sure how he felt about this. And I mean, ultimately, somebody was going to be in those shoes. Somebody was going to be in charge of the project.
Yeah. And I mean, there's two big points that people make about Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And one is that someone would have built the A-bomb regardless, because other people were working on it. So why not the United States? Whether or not you think these points are valid, I'm not making a case either way.
Sure.
And then the second, that Japan was never going to surrender. And you had kamikaze pilots. This actually gets into Godzilla.
Oh, yeah.
Where folks were saying, nope, kill yourselves, don't get taken, we're not surrendering, et cetera, et cetera. So by dropping the bomb and really sending a message that maybe more people were saved, that's a thing I've heard people say. Don't know the math behind that.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
how do you
It's
know?
hard to calculate. Apparently, 220,000 died between the two explosions. So the question is, would 220,000 people otherwise have been killed?
And I don't know. I have
I mean,
no idea.
the toll from World War II is huge. So
Yeah.
it's reasonable, I guess.
And then you get in the ethical conversation of, okay, are those soldier lives versus civilians?
Right,
Does one
yeah.
weigh more than the other? So on and so forth.
Yeah, it's really messy.
It is. And then you think about, like, if someone else were to be, I guess the Germans were essentially waning, where they were almost out of the picture, I guess, at the point
Yeah.
the bombs were dropped. But, like, if the Germans had beat us to atomic bomb, what would have been
Or
like if we weren't working on it and weren't pushing forward and establishing dominance in those fields, what would have happened if somebody else had? Or
like,
you know,
I think
how would
Russia
they?
probably would have been the one who got it.
Sure, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's probably more accurate. But
Yeah. Oh, that was an interesting moment in the movie when that was one of those scientists stepping back and reconsidering moments when they had just won the war against Germany, and now all the scientists were all met at Los Alamos. And I don't know if this actually happened. I'm assuming it did, where there was this ephemeral meeting at Los Alamos where they were like, "Wait, should we still be doing this? The war is over." And Oppenheimer had to point out that no, we're still at war with Japan.
Oh, yeah.
you know,
Well, and there was the one guy on the team who really had good ideas about the H-bomb, and they kept saying, like, don't work on that.
He was one of the bad guys at the end.
Yeah, because he was mad. Like, Oppenheimer stymied my work at every turn. But that was interesting because, they basically were already essentially doing groundwork on the H-bomb before Fat Man and Lil Boy were even a thing.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess
didn't
it
know
makes
that.
sense. Like you inventing a similar bomb. Like, why not start to invent the next one in the process?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a great scene with the science and guilt idea where after the war is over, I believe, or close to it, Oppenheimer goes to see Truman in the Oval Office.
Oh, yeah, I
And
loved that.
Oppenheimer is basically trying to, in a very shy, not like aggressive way, because he's clearly at this point being very weighed on by a lot of guilt, being like, you know, these bombs are kind of dangerous, like maybe we shouldn't keep doing this and all that, and like expressing that I don't feel good about what has happened to Truman. And Truman has this great line, which I can't repeat because we're not cursing on the podcast, that basically no one cares who made the thing, they care who gave the order to drop it.
Yeah, that was a great point where Truman's like, "Stop feeling sorry for yourself. Look at me. Like I hit that button."
Yeah.
And that was Gary Oldman.
Yeah,
Wasn't
it was.
it? Again.
It was. I didn't
'Cause-
realize that until I looked up the cast after. I was like, oh, it was Gary Oldman. So.
Yeah. I've heard the joke, maybe you're Gary Oldman and you just don't know. But totally stole that. But yeah, he did a really excellent job, even though he was in the movie for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
But yeah, important point.
Yeah.
Only president from Missouri. Let's remember that.
Oh,
Oh, I didn't know that.
I didn't know that.
yeah, yeah. The Truman Libraries in Kansas City.
You guys didn't know this? That
No.
Truman is our homegrown president. Well, you guys aren't from here. Yeah. Are you from here? Becky?
No.
Oh,
I am.
okay. So that's why we know this.
So you can just go and visit this library?
Yeah, it's like his
Yeah.
presidential library.
Okay.
presidential
I've actually never
libraries.
been to a presidential library, so I don't really
I
know.
don't think
what's
I've
in
been to
them.
one either, but yeah, you can it's
That's
their
nice.
thing.
Got
Is
invited to the Reagan Library, and I
is number
declined.
45 going to have his own library too? And what
find
kind of
out.
books are going to be there?
Probably
This just
the
reminds
best books, the biggest books.
the greatest book.
And they're all going to be read.
This really reminds me of the end of Veep, where Selena's trying really hard to get a library built in her name because she needs some sort of monument to her presidency.
Does she finally become president?
She does.
Spoilers.
Well,
I know it's an
Yeah,
old
you got to
show.
write in the bio. There's deep spoilers in
Kinda.
here
Well, I
too.
know she almost became president of the one
she
episode. and
does.
then-
She actually becomes president, I think, multiple times is the easiest way to say it. 'Cause she gets it and then loses it and then gets it again later.
Okay.
But the second time she gets it, she goes very power hungry and does a lot of very unethical things
Oh my
to
gosh.
get it. Like the last season of Veep is actually pretty dark in terms of what they do to get the presidency again. Now we're going to politics a little more with that, but yeah, the whole thing of the cycle, getting back to Oppenheimer, is the idea of the guilt and everything, and that scene with President Truman was just so that was the moment in the movie that kind of stood out to me the most about and then at the end when he. Oppenheimer walks out and Truman says whoever the secretary person or other staff member is don't let that crybaby back in here again. I was like,
That was-
whoa.
Yeah, that was very strong.
Truman was
ouch.
Truman was a very stern
Yeah,
guy. Yeah, a little crass.
just a little bit. So, actually, the other thing I want to talk about with the guilt thing, because it was such a good scene. I think this is before he went to the president. Is the scene when he's giving the victory celebratory speech to the gymnasium,
Oh, yeah.
where he's basically clearly dissociating, not comprehending that I'm physically here, supposed to be giving this hurrah speech. He's just thinking about the bomb dropping, and this is where the movie I thought was going to go a little more horror, but I'm actually kind of glad they pulled back and just gave little winks and nods to it. So they had people in the audience, and they had the whole thing where everyone's stamping really loudly, and you can't really hear what anyone's saying. You just hear the stamping and overwhelming volume of the room. Even though you
They
can't-
hinted at that scene a few times, even coming
They
up
do,
to it.
yeah,
That
they
was good
tease it, they tease
cinematography.
it.
It was, and they had the stamping, and it was what are they showing? And then finally, 30 minutes later, you're entering the victory scene.
Yeah. And they do the thing where they have like the bright flashes of light that he's imagining the audience experiencing, and then they have the woman's face her skin start to peel off, but that's all they show. They don't do anything more. I was a little worried we were gonna go full like Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like it was gonna be really messy. But then they also show the thing when he's walking out, he steps on basically like an ash-covered body that sort of collapses into dust. So like they have like little bits of it.
Oh, that was supposed to be a body?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
As a younger person, that would have just gone over my head. But I notice the older I get, the more all I need are those little hints, and my brain will just go to town, and then it's really upsetting, even though it doesn't show anything gory. But, so yeah, made a big impact on me.
Yeah, that was the other big scene I wanted to mention, relation to guilt.
Yeah. Do you remember at some point? I think it was when he was meeting with Truman, when he mentioned the way that people's stripes were burned on their skin. Do you remember this? It was like apparently in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, when people wore striped clothing, it was like the stripes were burned right into their skin because the pigment was transferred.
Oh.
Yeah, in Albuquerque, New Mexico, so that's like I think a couple hours from Los Alamos, they have the nuclear museum that has a bunch of just stuff, basically. And they have a little section that's about Nagasaki and Hiroshima, and they have a few small pictures of things, but I know they've been renovating, so museum, if you're out there and you fix this, I'm sorry. But at the time, it really didn't do it justice, like what happened there. I don't know why you made me think of that.
It's an interesting thing that they kind of leave that.
It's there.
It makes sense that you don't want to make it that graphic and things like that, I guess, to some degree. But it's like, yeah, I guess, if you're trying to like give the history and be like, yeah, this is cool that we did this, probably don't want to put in the horrible.
How big is Los Alamos still there? It's a city?
Oh, yeah. So I wish we had Sebastian here because he's probably been there more than myself. But yeah, so Sebastian, our old co-host, and myself both moved to St. Louis from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Los Alamos is just a little bit north. It's still a lab, Los Alamos National Lab. When you go into the town, you have to stop at a little security gate, and then they let you in the town proper. I heard there's like more PhDs there than anywhere else, so it's like a little mountain town right now. And then once or twice a year, they open up the Trinity site, and you can actually go to the Trinity site, and you can visit the little cabin that's right next door. They might have moved the cabin. I don't think it could have sat there. They must have. So you can go and see some of these things, and it's kind of profound to be at the Trinity site. And when you go, there's protesters talking about how there's still radiation poisoning and people getting cancer, because you have to take like a little bus actually out to the site, so there's like people out there. So it's
There's still radiation poisoning where?
They're saying that folks got sick because of the Trinity tests.
Okay.
And basically they just want people to know about it, that there's still people getting cancer.
And I think Oppenheimer kind of renewed a lot of that push. There was a lot of like protests and awareness around the Oppenheimer thing, because like, we have this movie about this guy being a hero, and there's all of this, the downstream effects of the testing, and the people that lived around these sites and downwind of the sites like still experience issues from that and things, which was pretty interesting.
So, but when are they still running tests? I'm confused how people.
It's
are
more
still
generational.
So
it's people like, my family suffered a generation ago. People might still, 30, like from nuclear meltdown or something like that, it's like 30, 40 years before things are generally inhabitable. So if you're testing bombs, there's still a lingering effect, I'm sure.
So visiting the Trinity site, are you exposing yourself or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Probably
Briefly.
not like enough.
It's not as much as if
It's
you
like
like
it's
live
minimal,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if you're like walking, I don't know. Actually, I don't know. I'm not going to make a comment on that. But I remember I went with a couple friends, and I happened to take a selfie there, and I never shared it. And then one of my friends who was a PhD physicist that was there were like, do you want a picture here? It's like physics. And he was like, no, no, thank you. And it was very weird to be there and just see people running around doing touristy things and participating in the touristy things. It was a very weird bit of cognitive dissonance in my short time there.
I should take my husband there or ask him if he wants to go, because he's from China, so I'm sure he has a totally unique take on it. I know we were sided with China in the in the World War and then decided against them shortly afterwards. So I wonder what his take would be on even the prospect of visiting it.
Mm-hmm.
Visiting the cabin where Oppenheimer and all of the, obviously they worked on lots of different places, was interesting. And if you go into Los Alamos proper, you can visit some places that look to me like they were in the movie. Possibly the area where they had the gymnasium scene kind of thing.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, you can go to Los Alamos and visit some of this stuff.
Interesting, yeah, because I know a lot of things are filmed like in Albuquerque or in New Mexico because of like the ease of filming there with Texas and the laws and stuff. So a lot of that movie might be pretty accurate in location as well.
I think it was.
Yeah.
Looking at some of the places, I was like, oh, I think I've been there.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm almost positive they were in New Mexico.
That's kind of cool.
100%.
Nice.
So yeah, Los Alamos is there. You can visit. You just show your driver's license to the people at the gate, and you can go eat lunch. And there's banks, and it's just a normal town other than the gate to get in.
Interesting. So does the lab still do like nuclear weapons stuff, or they just kind of do a little bit of everything?
I don't know. You can go be a biologist there.
Okay.
So if because I think they do. I'm getting things confused. I wish Sebastian was here. But there's also White Sands Missile.
Hey listeners, Jeremy here. Just some technical notes I want to insert at this point. When we were recording the podcast at about the 46-minute mark, things started to get a little bumpy tech-wise. Either the microphones dropped or bits wouldn't record. So I'm inserting a few little interludes during the next few minutes to help you, the audience, understand where the conversation went and what we were talking about for the pieces that got dropped or you didn't get to hear. The next few minutes might be a tad bit bumpy, but stick with us, it gets better. At this point, Becky had just finished her thoughts on the research at Los Alamos and the surrounding area, and then me, Jeremy, asked the panel about this idea of who should get the credit for big discoveries, and is it important for someone in science to be sort of the representation of a discovery or the spokesperson that all the publics or people who are not very aware of science can kind of look towards as a sort of face of it. Is kind of, he's getting all the credit. He's on Time Magazine. He's the father of the atomic bomb, all of that. Do we think just in general, maybe in the context of the movie or the historical time period, and maybe also just a larger point of discovery, is it really important to have like one person be the face of the discovery to like pinpoint like this is the person that did that thing, or like does that matter?
I think in modern times we try not to do that. I've noticed. I can't remember what the project was, but think about Pfizer with the vaccines. There's no particular face of the vaccine. I mean, maybe Fauci, but everybody knows Fauci was not the guy to develop the vaccine. He was the guy to promote the vaccine.
People probably actually don't know that. They probably think that
Oh,
Fauci
no.
was probably.
Well, but I don't think anybody knows what the individual looks like who first figured out this vaccine style, or who first sequenced the virus, or who first sequenced the spike protein to then go into the vaccine. I don't think there is any particular face associated with that.
They probably all signed NDAs.
Hey, it's Jeremy again on the editing side. So another little hiccup we had. We caught this one though, so I was able to give a little intro on what Webster was saying and kind of lead the audience again into it. All right, and I'll bring it back. Sorry about that, folks. A little technical hiccup, but we're back now. So we were just talking about who gets the credits for big discoveries, kind of having a face to a discovery for kind of the historical purposes, and Webster was going to keep making his point about vaccines.
Oh, yeah. So with Pfizer, they made their vaccine, their mRNA vaccine. It's an mRNA. It's inside a lipid nanoparticle. But Pfizer wasn't actually the first group to do this. This was a lab. I don't remember where the lab was. My brother suggested it might have been in Germany. But this lab, they managed to put an mRNA in a lipid nanoparticle, like in like a little vesicle. And they got a cell to take it in and the mRNA to be transcribed. And the cell started producing little viral particles. So in theory, the face of the vaccine could have been this lab that first did this work. I think there would be pros and cons to that. I think one pro would be that you would get less popular resistance to the vaccine. You now have a face behind it. It's familiar. It's not a mega corporation. It's actually a cute little innocent lab that was just trying to do science. On the other hand, though, to the extent that you still have the resistance, that lab could easily be targeted, and nobody wants that.
Yeah, I think going to your earlier point that on the one hand, putting a face to a discovery for history purposes is kind of mean or inappropriate for all the other scientists who worked really hard in it. The lab technicians, the project managers, all that stuff. But on the other hand, I feel like the general public kind of needs to understand that there is some kind of person associated with it, even if it's not entirely accurate. I think the movie does a great job at showing that Oppenheimer is not this one person. Like, it is a large swath of scientists and a team of people working together to come to this goal. But he's just kind of like the public face, kind of like Fauci with vaccines. I know Fauci didn't make the vaccine, but people kind of like direct that idea towards him.
Yeah, I feel like that's everything. Like, that's kind of what it, like, a lot of these issues are like, this is just like an issue, like something all around. Like when you were talking about, be it the face or I forget the subject we were talking about earlier, where it's just like, this is an issue with musicians, this is an issue with everything. Like, everything is a huge production. There's no one person that like is the sole proprietor of anything outside of like a small business or something like that. Like even politics, it's an entire cabinet and staff and all these things behind this stuff. So it's interesting that people like kind of need that head character to like blame, and I guess it makes sense.
Blame and to promote whatever.
And promote,
they want to do,
good or bad, they need that, like the head of the totem pole, and that's what the focus falls on. But
yeah, also movies that aren't main character driven are often confusing in terms of plot to me. I have a harder time following them.
Sure, yeah, maybe it's like a social or psychological thing that we like just have to make sense.
We intuit to attach to a human, a single face, as opposed to a collective or like a flock.
It does make it more, I guess, it's easy to be more personable if like there's just a few people you have to follow. I think a year or two ago, one winter, however many years back, I watched Chernobyl, which is like an HBO miniseries on like the fallout in Ukraine and all that stuff. And much like Oppenheimer, there's actually a team of people that historically worked on fixing the problem of the like the fire at the nuclear plant and all the fallout and everything. But there's really only like 3 science characters you follow in the HBO series, and one of them is sort of a creative liberty. I forget her name, but she's like this scientist that they fly in, but she isn't actually a historical figure. She's basically the amalgamation of all the scientists that also helps the other main 2 characters, because that helps a lot as an audience member if you just follow 3 people and not 300 or however many that actually were involved. Which, it's not to discredit all those people, but it's just like too many bodies and too many like people you have to follow in your mind.
Yeah, I've seen that even happen in fiction. Like, I don't remember if it was a Harry Potter movie or what, but I was like, they totally took like 3 characters and combined them into one right here. Like, it's just easy.
Oh yeah, I've seen that happen.
Yeah.
When Jurassic Park was still following the books, that happened a few times. Yeah.
Don't get me started on Lord of the Rings.
Oh, where was Tom Bombadil?
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
Okay, so I have 2 more questions, but I'll kind of wrap them into one. So scientists are working together in the movie. This idea of collaboration as scientists, we work together, generally speaking, unless we're doing our PhD and you have to like work on everything by yourself. That's the fun part of that. But there's a lot of collaboration in the movie. The collaboration kind of runs up against, geopolitics, fear of communism, all that. What were our thoughts kind of on how all that played out in terms of them trying to collaborate to build the atomic bomb in the wake of military secrecy, security clearance, scare of communism, not letting other countries know what we're doing, or letting certain countries know what we're doing, and getting scientists to come over and all of that?
Yeah, because that was the whole crux of the thing, is they were like, no, communists can't work on this because they might share things with Russia. And Russia got all their stuff anyway.
Yeah, well, there was the one guy who was.
Yeah, he was actually helping.
So that guy historically was actually like a Russian spy?
I believe... Yeah, I'm sure that was based on.
Okay, because part of me, as we were building up to it, was like, oh, is this just a paranoia thing where like
That's
everyone's
what I thought
freaking out about it,
well.
but like maybe he's actually just an innocent guy and they're gonna like kill him, even though he's not actually associated, but he actually was. So I guess.
Yeah, I definitely thought that there was going to be that it would just all be paranoia and none of it would be. Maybe some of it would be kind of grain of salt. Maybe this guy was, but no, there was the one person who truly was a Russian spy. In the movie, and so I mean the movie, I think that was a major topic in the movie was the security. Let's keep it all segregated, separate departments. What was the word they used? Do you guys remember?
I don't know.
It wasn't
Compartmentalized?
yes, compartmentalization. was the key to their security.
Which is a terrible way to run a science project.
Yeah.
But I can see it being critical when it's.
Hey everybody, it's Jeremy again from the editing bay. One last time. So Webster just finished his point on compartmentalization and how kind of separating information sharing in the military and science collaboration projects was key to ultimately getting things done and not letting information leak to other countries. And then now Becky is going to resume talking about how it's important to have background checks on people, but you shouldn't necessarily hold their ideologies or their background beliefs against them when doing research.
Yeah, so my opinion on that is I don't really care about someone's political views. However, if you do feel like they're going to be sympathetic to a not so great cause, like in the movie, I believe in checking up on people and doing those background checks, but I do wish we wouldn't look so much at like politics and religion and stuff like that.
I almost wonder if it's easier to facilitate nowadays. Back then you had to look through somebody's trash, look through somebody's mail, whatever. Nowadays, I mean, you can pretty much just say, okay, you're working on a government project. You don't have your own cell phone for the time being. Here's your government cell phone. Make sure you don't type anything bad.
Sure.
Like,
There's a lot of infrastructure now too. I have a relative that he worked for the FBI, is retired, and now does background checks for that. So they just have people that go around and interview your friends and family and go and talk to you. So I think they've got that down a little bit more, might help. But there's a lot of, there's like designated people whose entire job is to just background check people. So
I got interviewed once about a guy I knew in college. Like, they don't ask you to list people. They go find people.
yeah.
yeah, I know. When my dad hires somebody new for his company, he they have professional background check websites that will go and do certain work for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't have, I guess, strong thoughts on the security versus science collaboration thing. I kind of see both points. I guess my one thought is just how much of what happens in the movie is like today. Like, do we have that level of like national security secrecy for science, or is it just weapons based? Because like we're in academia, so we're pretty open.
Is it called DARPA? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
DARPA,
Yeah.
Homeland Security. If you have DARPA grants, Homeland Security pays you visits somewhat regularly.
At Idaho State, in our computer sciences department, there were some labs you couldn't go into without clearance. And I know those national labs that I was talking about, like Los Alamos and Sandia, absolutely super secret squirrel things happening there that they can't share or publish.
Oh man, that'd be so exciting though to learn about what they actually do in those places.
Yeah.
Hopefully, unless it's really boring.
Yeah, I could also see
Top
that where like it's not as
secret, like-
exciting as you think it would be.
It's like they're dealing with one compound that's confidential, that maybe even is peripheral to the experiments, and like that's why it's top
We
secret.
have made tape that
Yeah.
never loses its stickiness. You know.
That's a big deal. I would like that. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Actually, they're close to that discovery.
It's all about the potential military application. I remember my first year when I took behavioral ecology, we read this paper on bridge building ants, and Dr. Dunlap pointed out at the bottom, like, note who the contributors are. And it was like a bunch of like DARPA and other like agencies looking at this, and I was like, this is so weird. But like the sheer amount of money they got for it was kind of insane. It's like once you get into bed in the military, like obviously you have like, your security stuff, but like you do get a lot of money. So there's trade-offs.
And I think from what I understand, they will kind of not throw money away, but like they don't expect all the stuff that they fund to like really be fruitful for their means, but they're like, we're just going to throw money at all these things that we think might work out for us. And so you get bridge building ant funded research by the Department of Defense. That's all right.
Maybe they'll pull that out in some files later and be like, we need robots to do what these ants
Yeah,
do.
exactly.
So
Recently, actually, there was a discovery. They now have designed a material that links itself together like fire ants do when they make rafts.
there we go.
So ant discoveries can go far.
There's a lot to tap into.
The ants are going to save this country.
Probably. In some capacity they are. Okay, so those are all the big questions that I had. I guess as we sort of wrap up topic of the show, do we have any final thoughts on Oppenheimer, on any of the themes? Just any likes, dislikes, things that were positive, negative, final thoughts?
I'll be the prude. I don't think the sex scenes added to the story in this case.
Yeah,
That's the only
we can
complaint
talk
I
about,
got.
we can talk about the sex scenes real quick if you want.
I would agree. Well, but I think visually they were just a nice contrast from so much bomb.
Fair.
So-
I was kind of laughing how bold it was when they just did the sex scene during the trial to show that like he is totally exposed. They're exposing
Yeah.
his
That
relationship
was
with Gene Tatlock in
interesting.
front of
Okay.
his wife. I was like, whoa, this is intense.
So maybe that is good as a storytelling device, but there's a few other times where I was like, really?
Oh yeah, that
We're
was
visiting
like
this again.
pretty typical.
And I don't feel like I'm a prude, but maybe
Yeah,
I am.
Gene Tadlock, they got very much into her naked
Yeah,
body.
they did.
But regardless of teehee sex scenes, I think it's an excellent film. I would encourage people to see it. That's kind of where I'm
it's
standing on
3
it.
hours, well worth your time. And it's not just like, oh, I feel good after I saw that. It's like while you're watching it, you're very engrossed. It's really enjoyable to watch.
Yeah, based on all the things we've talked about, I think if you're a scientist or if you're not a scientist, you should see it.
Yeah,
There's lots of good insight.
Even just for it's pretty.
It is
shot
it's also
really nice.
very well shot, and it
Yep.
is very well made movie.
And good score. Good
Yeah,
score
and
too.
good score. Yeah, it's just a well made movie all about. So yeah, it's going to wrap up our Oppenheimer review discussion 6 months later. Now it's time for Outside of Science, where, you guessed it, we talk about things outside of science to prove that we are in fact not robots. So it's currently winter break. We're not quite back into the swing of classes and teaching and all that fun stuff, but we will be very shortly. What has everyone been up to over winter break?
I've been sick.
You've been sick.
awful.
Fun.
I went to the VP ball right before Christmas. Had a nice Christmas with my family, and then got sick. Like I just had horrible sinus infection for 2 weeks.
I also
Sounds
got
about
sick
right.
from my relatives, and I feel mostly better now. But yeah, I don't know. I read some books.
Okay.
I slept in.
Did anybody go to Garden Glow?
I went
Garden
the other
Glow is
night
always
and it
pretty.
was snowing. It was amazing.
Oh, that sounds
Oh.
awesome.
Yeah, we like happened to
You
pick
went
the
Friday
best
night? Okay.
Went Friday night. We took my
Wow.
8-year-old niece, and she was like,
Oh, I bet
so
she loved
yeah,
it.
she was stoked. So that was a lot of fun.
Garden Glow is at the Botanical Garden?
Yes.
Okay. I remember hearing about this. I just
Mhm.
haven't been to it.
Have you ever been? You should go.
I've been to the Botanical Garden, just not
It's
too far.
very
The glow, I
the
mean.
lights they use are very high tech, very artistic.
Yeah, this year was pretty cool. They're starting to get in, like you said, high tech. They're getting a little bit more like
Ooh.
synced up to music lights, and they
Yeah,
have
I
like
like
one
the
of the
bucket
houses
lights.
is projector.
Do you remember the buckets?
Oh, so they have projection.
Yeah, they have the
mapping?
bucket lights again this year. I didn't go last
Love it.
year. My trick is to go every like 2 or 3 years, because like things get reused. But
That's
like
true,
by 2 or 3 years later, then it's like
the stuff they had
entirely new
shining on the
stuff.
house was pretty awesome.
That was nuts. Yeah,
That was
I was
insane.
really
Yeah.
surprised by that.
But that could just be a commercially available thing. Like there's nothing
see.
about it
Yeah.
that is unique to botanical gardens.
So in my last job, we did a lot of projection mapping, and that single projector stuff is a lot easier, but you still have to get special software and set up the shape
Mhm.
and do all the animation. And so it's getting cheaper, but it's not cheap. And those projectors are crazy expensive.
Yeah, I was going to say the projector is probably a limiting factor in general.
Some of those things
Public.
get up to 6 figures.
Yeah,
It's
easily.
crazy. Anyway, but it sounds fun.
Yeah, it's a good time.
What did you do, Jeremy?
I went back east to New Jersey / Maryland to see my folks. So what have I been up to? Mostly just doing lots of movie watching and game playing and such. I'll shout out 2 things. Watch Scott Pilgrim. What is it called on Netflix?
Is it the cartoon?
new
or
one?
Scott
the-
Pilgrim Takes Off
Yeah,
on
yeah.
Netflix. It's like the anime cartoon version of Scott Pilgrim. If you saw the movie back in 2010, it's really, really good. They kind of flip the plot on its head. If you're familiar, the premise is Scott Pilgrim has to battle 7 evil exes to get his girlfriend Ramona Flowers. It's just like a very goofy video gamey setup. It's very heavily inspired by video game stuff. Miraculously, somehow, they got all the voice actors from the original movie in 2010 to come back. So Michael Cena plays Scott Pilgrim, who's like the lead. Mary Elizabeth Winstead plays Ramona Flowers, like his love interest, and they got like Chris Evans, who you know is Captain America from the Marvel fame. He was one of the evil exes, and Brie Larson, who plays Captain Marvel in the Marvel movies, she's in
Yeah.
this as well. Anna Kendrick from I forget the name of the dance movie that got really popular with Cups.
With cops?
The song Cups.
Oh.
Oh.
Oh, I do not know.
But you
were
know what I'm
asking the wrong-
talking about.
No.
Okay, never mind.
I have no idea either.
Brandon Ruth, there's a bunch of other names, but Audrey Plaza from Parks and Rec fame, she was in this movie also. Like this is all before their careers like really launched and they got super famous, and they all came back and did their voices. So it's really, really cool to see. It's only like 8 episodes, so it's a
Okay.
pretty short watch.
It turns the plot on its head. It's just not quite the same thing.
So it is still there's still the 7 evil exes. The way they go about this is a little different. So if you've seen the movie and you're like, I think I know what's going to happen, no, you don't. It's actually going to be a little different.
All right.
Cool.
But again, because they brought everyone back from
I
the
always
movie, it's
like
really
the
cool.
vegetarian X in that one.
Oh yeah, the
superpower.
vegan.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's a vegan that gives him superpowers somehow.
That was a good bit.
I like the coffee switch, little Princess Bride action going on.
Oh yeah,
To get him to drink the non-vegan coffee.
yeah. And then the other thing I want to shout out in terms of just stuff is my brother and I played this co-op game called Untitled Goose Game, which is basically a
They
game.
made it co-op now?
They made it co-op. So
Ooh.
basically, if you haven't heard this game, it's like a 2-hour game. You can play it with someone on like a Friday night. You basically get to play as a goose, and if you have a friend or partner or whatever, you can have a co-op friend, and you can both be geese, and you just run around and like harass people. And there's little
Mayhem.
objectives to do. Like the first example is like there's like a farmer, and he's like doing some farming stuff, and you can like steal his keys and lock him out of his garden, and then like turn on the sprinkler and get him wet, and then like you can honk at him while he's like hammering, and he'll like smack his hand and fall over and get knocked out. Like it's very very goofy and silly.
What's the name of this game?
It's called Untitled Goose Game. It's on everything: Switch, PlayStations, Xboxes, Steam. So like, if you have a friend and you want like a really goofy, fun time for a night, totally go for it.
I didn't finish it, but I did single player.
It's a
Can
good game.
recommend.
Yes,
Fun.
very fun game. But yeah, just other movies and stuff. I watched a bunch of the DC movies on Netflix also.
Nice.
So
Nice.
those are all fun popcorn flicks. But yeah, that's kind of mostly what I've been up to.
Cool.
Then flew back and now ready for the trudge again. The semester.
The science.
The
It must
science.
start.
The science is fun. I think it's all the teaching that he's.
Depending on some days, teaching is more worrying than the science.
He's
and
got a
vice versa.
bazillion DNA extractions and PCRs to do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's no. I have a
Fun.
bazillion DNA extractions and PCRs to do as well, actually.
Yeah.
So,
But any last things for outside of science before we wrap up the show? All right, cool. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode of That Science and Nature Show. We'll be back on UMSL Radio in just a few short weeks. But I want to thank Becky, thank Webster, and thank you, Ray, for bringing your equipment in as always and being an awesome technical guru. Remember, you can find past episodes of That Science and Nature Show on Spotify, Google Podcast, and Amazon. Until next time, my name is Jeremy Howard. You've been listening to That Science and Nature Show, and we are out.
We did it.